again, my friends. This is our weekly edition of SCLC Today TV. And of course, it wouldn't be a TV show without our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, we had a great show last week, starting out with your wife. This week, though, as we're recording this, as it will play out through the weekend, it's the NBA playoffs. People are watching basketball. Also, during the summer of protests, people are watching many of these athletes, basketball players, football players, become activists. What's your thinking about athletes articulating social protests, civil rights protests?
I think it's great, but to every opportunity, there is a mechanism called building relationships. Only thing that I would suggest is that people who have been in the business, I don't like to call it activism, I like to call it civil rights, what it is. People who have been in the civil rights business, which is a science, should be recognized as the leaders of their accomplishments and for their sustainability. Even though you're an NBA athlete or NFL athlete, you can't come out here when the summer is hot and march and give your opinion, then go back home. We stay out here all the time, Mr. Eden. We don't deal with the issue and then say, now it's time to go play ball, or it's time to go to the movie show, or it's time to go back to my job. This is our job. And we don't get paid a whole lot of money. So come to the experts. But see, we're still sustainable. We're still here. We have not left. Many of the people who just think that they can be a leader by picking up a sign and say, we ain't going to take it no more, and write it and get on the 6 o'clock news, and then you don't hear from them until another crisis. We are out here all of the time, as you know, getting people off death row, getting people respectability in corporate America, getting people out of the cars when sleeping on the street and finding a shelter for them. This is a humanitarian effort of civil rights that would never go away in terms of helping people. You can't just help people and get the publicity and get the headline, and then you go back just as things are usual. You need to support even in your absence of not being there in the civil rights movement. There are other ways you can support, not just to get attention.
Do you see many of these athletes or celebrities being opportunistic, or is it their awakening of what you've done all your life?
Well, first of all, it's a study, Mr. Eden. Maynard, this is a science, and people don't realize this. Just like you go to school and to be trained in basketball, that is a science. You know,
we can't do that. We can't do that. That's for sure.
We can't do that, but they can, and they can't do this. You know, with limitations, they can. They can't do this. You know, as you mentioned, I'm here dealing with death row. I'm here trying to show the system all over the world. You're talking about criminal justice reform. Here's a young man, Purvis Payne, been on death row for 33 years. Where have I been? Where have they been to bring about the injusticeness of this particular case? We search these cases out sometimes, but most times the cases find us. A young man was just murdered. Don't know how, but he was incarcerated in Metro Atlanta. I won't call the county because we're still investigating. I was talking to the attorney today, and something is wrong with that. So I can't run home just because I had a victory in Chicago, had a victory in Miami, you're ready to have a victory in California. I can't run home. I got to stay out here and help those who are less fortunate in terms of the system and systemic racism, from ABC to the holistic approach of the human element. You start with A, B, C, D, but it never ends. You go to school, you be trained in certain areas. Let me tell you a story. This young man who finished college, it was two of them, and said, Mr. Brown, we back home I just got my BA and Bob got his BS. Said, we ready to make it now. And then they heard a voice. They said, Mr. Brown, did you say something? He said, no, that was the voice of life. He said, what did life say? Said, life said, come on, I'm waiting on you so I can teach you the rest of your alphabets. You must realize there's never an end to getting an education. Most failures bring about wisdom and education. You get up, dust yourself off, and do it again. If you're going to come out there and go ahead.
Yeah, keep on moving. That's what life teaches you.
That's right. Keep on moving. Yeah.
Today on Capitol Hill, Viola Fletcher, a 107-year-old survivor of the Wall Street Massacre in 1921, testified, 107 years old now, boss, about the Tulsa Race Riot, declaring the nation, black folks need reparations, a subject you talk about a lot. What do you think of that?
I think it's marvelous, first of all, that God has blessed her to live that long.
Yeah.
And I think the history, and this is what most people, regardless of the generation this, generation that, and I'm going to say this system and the world system systemically separate us by putting labels on us, and particularly from one generation to another. We are all people who are in dire need of reparation to some degree. But let's just say African Americans and people of color. This young lady, and I've been to Greenwood community, in Tulsa. It's a black community. That's where all of the murders, assassination, the lynching, that's where all the racism came about, because you had Black Wall Street. And this country has never paid us for the suffering of slavery, then of Jim Crow, then of lynching throughout America, not just in the South, but throughout America. I was just reading, Mr. Eden, showed it to my wife. I got a letter from the family out of Greenwood, Mississippi, where they want me to come down and participate in the commemoration of this young girl with 13 years of age. And she answered an ad for babysitting for a Caucasian couple. And she wanted to make some money so she could go back to school with some clothes and look mighty tidy and be impressionable as a nice, clean, dressable young lady. She answered the ad. Lord knows what happened after that. She went over and was intercepted by the Ku Klux Klan, who evidently had some inside information on who wrote the ad. Told the young lady where to come, went home, and she was going there to babysit. They raped her, lynched her, and mutilated her.
Wow.
This was like 55 years ago. And they want me to come to Greenwood, Mississippi. What am I saying? That's just one case that America must understand. Then when you have our elected officials who get out from the Republican side as well as the Democrat and say America has no racism, or America is not a racist country. It was built upon racism. And that's what's wrong with what's going on now. We're afraid to talk about and to be healed in terms of our experiences for over 400 years. Racism was founded in America. It started in Africa when we were sold into slavery. The worst forced migration of any human element or people was the transatlantic African slave trade. And we have never overcome that experience. Yes, we demand reparation.
I was raised that way. My parents taught me that too, much like you're preaching and teaching. We were heard in a black church. But your critics will say, that's past. We can't pay for the past. Your critics say, why are you arguing about what should have happened as opposed to where we're going forward? Critics say that. What do you say, boss, President Steele?
I say that the word reparation itself comes from the rooted word repair. Reparations simply means repair. repair America, what you destroyed as a human element within the African American race. You need to come forward, be healed from the plantation and the mastery point of view, as well as us as descendants from slavery. We're descendants. We are the bloodline of descendants of slaves of America. I like what Rodney King said several years ago. He said, why can't we just get along?
No.
Doc Rivers, as you know, my favorite quote, one of my favorites. All these years we have loved America, but America has never loved us. Show us some love, give us reparation. Let me just say this. Man. It's a research that just came out a few months ago and was saying for all of the Caucasians in the country, if they would just pause, don't run their business, don't go to work, and just say, out of goodness of the spirit of doing what's right, we want the African Americans and black folks to catch up with us financially. You know how many years it would take for us to catch up, and they just stop and wait on us to catch up with them? 222 years.
Wow. I do remember
222 years. I deal with facts.
Well, the fact is, many of your neighbors, many of us throughout in the black communities and poor white communities across this country will soon be faced with evictions. Many are predicting the next American crisis is an epidemic of evictions. That affects the people you speak for, the poor, does it not?
Absolutely. I see them every day, Maynard. Right there, as you know, behind our office building, up and down Auburn Avenue, Edgewood, people sleeping in their cars. I pay out of my pocket weekly to some of the young folks, and they are decent folks, just made a mistake in life. Wasn't strong enough to deal with the diabolical elements of this life, which is the spirit of Satan and the devil. We live in a diabolical society of evilness and evil spirits. So many people are not strong like we are. They are weak. They gave in to the drugs, and the drugs was brought into our community. You know, that's why you don't hear much about the Ku Klux Klan anymore, because the drugs removed the Ku Klux Klan from destroying our people. The drugs and the guns was brought in, and it was a conspiracy. What am I saying? It's a shame and a disgrace that anyone will be evicted from their home. Sure, we must have priorities. Sure, we must have people to understand this is a capitalistic society. But what I'm saying, we need to make sure that we have close relationships and contact with people who really need the help, but can't afford it, but willing to advance from the government in a loan to the people. And it's just like a tax. The people will pay it back. It's inhumane to evict anyone who have any sense of being a human being and doing the right thing. Many people, majority of the people, want to do the right thing, but we must come to their assistance. And this government has failed us and let us down.
Speaking of failing us, our producer, Rick Clear, mentioned this. He says, Governor Brian Kemp and other governors throughout America are ending unemployment benefits early, cutting them off. But he says, while that may sound like a good thing to conservatives, what it's doing is throwing freelancers under the bus. People have to do 2 or 3 jobs. People have different gigs. No longer can survive just hustling. That's an array of folks, is it not?
Man, again, I really put the responsibility on the churches, on the leaders. I mean, I can't let the church go free like this. We need to come together.
You never do. You call a spade, Dr. Steve.
I call a spade. So when I get to heaven, God said, Steele, did you tell him? I said, Lord, I told him everything you gave me because I want to help the situation before I get to my permanent home. We're going to be judged. So the church has to stand out. The church has to, if these people can't afford a meal, not just to get on the 6 o'clock news and say, we gave away 1,000 meals. You need to give away many, many meals every day, 3 times a day. And don't worry about the news. The news has become a dictator to our culture. And we need to realize, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the news. You go out there and you have all this infiltration of violence in a march. Here come the news. Here come cable TV. Here they come. You know why? Their ratings goes up. But you leave a decent march. You leave a non-violent march, and you can very seldomly find the major networks.
I'm going to end on this note. I'm a news guy. I'm a journalist. But much like you just said,
I didn't mean to beat up on you. I'm sorry.
but much like you said, tonight's news in Atlanta and across the national news, they leave about murders, bloodshed. But nobody, at the bottom of the news, they may have talked about the evictions. It's about blood and ratings, not about people, don't you think?
Absolutely. Again, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's a shame. Hey, somebody shot, 2 or 3 were shot at the club last night. It's on 5th Street. It leads to story. So many times people will create a violent act just to rush home if they're not apprehended, just to rush home to watch it on TV. So the TV and the networks must be held accountable as well. Because many times, a lot of these things want to take place if they think that the TV and the news media is not covering them. They want to be seen instantaneously famous for doing the wrong thing.
Dr. Steele is an 8-time Emmy Award-winning television journalist. I can't say you're wrong. But I can say this has been SCLC Today TV, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, sir.